David Ruffin was once the voice that made the Temptations shine, but one surprising move pushed Berry Gordy to ban him forever. What secret clash destroyed their golden partnership? David Ruffin, a star entangled in scandal and survival. David Ruffin's powerful voice once carried him to the heights of Motown glory, but behind the spotlight, his life was riddled with addiction and legal battles. His fight with substances began as early as 1967, marking the start of a struggle that would shadow him for the rest of his career. In 1978, during a birthday celebration in Memphis, Ruffin was arrested for disorderly conduct after allegedly refusing repeated requests to leave a party. Reports even claimed he threatened police officers and their families, though Ruffin strongly denied these allegations. He was released shortly afterward without bail. By 1982, his troubles escalated. Failing to pay more than $310,000 in taxes from 1975 to 1977 led to a 6-month sentence at a minimum security prison in Terre Haute, Indiana, along with a fine of $5,000. Thanks to good behavior, he was released after only 4 months. The problems did not stop there. On May 19, 1986, Ruffin entered a no-contest plea over charges of concealing stolen goods, a Colt .32 caliber handgun worth under $100. He received a fine of $50 plus an additional $100 in court costs, while more serious charges, including violence, were dismissed. Just a year later, in July of 1987, police raided a Detroit home and accused Ruffin of intending to distribute less than 20 grams of illegal substance. Though cleared of the trafficking charge, he was convicted of substance use, sentenced to 2 years of probation in order to complete 50 days of community service. By 1989, after violating probation 3 times, Ruffin entered a 28-day rehabilitation program at the Ariba Casriel Institute in New York, once again battling his demons. Despite looking perfect on the outside, the Temptations had underlying tensions. What truly caused the cracks? The growing tensions. By the mid-1960s, the Temptations stood as one of Motown's brightest jewels. Their polished harmonies, sharp choreography, and dazzling stage presence helped them dominate charts and captivate audiences nationwide. Yet behind the glittering exterior of the group's success, an inner storm began to brew, one largely tied to the restless ambition and unpredictable behavior of David Ruffin. Ruffin, whose unmistakable raspy tenor had elevated the group's sound, increasingly viewed himself as more than just one member of the ensemble. Adored by fans and often singled out by critics as the group's vocal powerhouse, Ruffin developed a growing conviction that his stardom eclipsed the collective identity of the Temptations. It was not long before he began to push for the group's name to be changed to David Ruffin and the Temptations, mirroring what had recently occurred with Diana Ross and the Supremes. For his bandmates, Otis Williams, Eddie Kendricks, Melvin Franklin, and Paul Williams, the suggestion was unacceptable. The Temptations had always prided themselves on their unity, carefully presenting themselves as a group of equals. Ruffin's insistence threatened that bond. Although they recognized his extraordinary contributions, they could not condone elevating one member above the others. The rift only deepened as Ruffin's ego inflated with each round of applause. Tensions worsened offstage as well. Ruffin began making increasingly unusual demands, such as requesting his private limousine lined with mink, which he shared with his then-girlfriend and fellow Motown singer Tammy Terrell. While the other Temptations traveled together in a shared vehicle, Ruffin enjoyed a more extravagant ride, reinforcing the perception that he saw himself as separate from the group. As his appetite for luxury grew, so did his reputation for unreliability. Rumors of illegal substance use began to circulate, raising concerns about his focus and discipline. More than once, he arrived late for rehearsals or skipped them altogether, leaving his fellow members frustrated and scrambling. On tour, he could be temperamental, occasionally clashing with his bandmates over song choices or stage arrangements. His absences and lateness became a troubling pattern, undermining the group's reputation for professionalism. By 1967, what had once been the smooth workings of one of Motown's most celebrated acts had grown tense and fragile. For the other Temptations, who valued unity above all else, Ruffin's increasingly erratic behavior was becoming not only disruptive, but also dangerous to their long-term survival as a group. Despite trying to keep everything together, the tensions had already reached their peak. The breaking point. The breaking point arrived gradually, a series of incidents that piled frustration upon frustration until the group could no longer ignore the problem. Ruffin's missed commitments became increasingly reckless, showing a disregard not just for the group, but for their fans as well. One particularly damaging episode occurred in June of 1968 at the Cleveland Supper Club. The Temptations were scheduled for a performance, yet Ruffin failed to appear. Instead, he reportedly spent the evening with Barbara Gail Martin, daughter of famed entertainer Dean Martin. Some accounts even suggested that Ruffin had also been pursuing a relationship with Diana Ross, which further complicated the situation given the rivalry between Motown's top groups. Whatever the details, his absence was inexcusable in the eyes of his bandmates. This was not an isolated incident. Ruffin frequently skipped rehearsals, missed meetings, or arrived unprepared, leaving the other Temptations to shoulder the burden of maintaining their reputation. His disrespect extended to the group's management as well. While the others sought to maintain professional harmony with Motown executives, Ruffin openly clashed with founder Berry Gordy. Money was at the heart of much of the conflict. Ruffin demanded greater transparency over earnings and royalties, pushing Motown to open its financial books. The group was granted access to an outside accounting firm, yet that firm was denied full visibility into International Talent Management Incorporated, a subsidiary tied to Motown. For Ruffin, this partial disclosure was insufficient. His persistence angered Gordy, who prioritized control and secrecy in Motown's business dealings. To his bandmates, Ruffin's actions seemed increasingly self-serving and disruptive. His behavior threatened their collective future, and by the middle of 1968, they had grown weary of trying to manage him. The camaraderie that had once defined the group was eroding. Even Eddie Kendricks, who had been close to Ruffin, began to feel that enough was enough. The group's frustration reached its peak. The Temptations, already weary from Ruffin's constant disruptions, concluded that they could not continue with him. Although the thought of replacing such a powerful and recognizable voice was daunting, the risks of keeping him in the group had become too great. Berry Gordy's decision. Motown founder Berry Gordy had long valued discipline and professionalism above all else. To him, every artist represented not just a creative act, but also a business investment. While he admired Ruffin's talent, he recognized that the singer's behavior was jeopardizing the stability of one of Motown's flagship groups. To Gordy, Ruffin had shifted from being an asset to becoming a liability. In June of 1968, the matter came to a head. After Ruffin skipped the Cleveland engagement, the remaining Temptations made a collective decision. David Ruffin had to go. On June 27th, legal paperwork was signed, officially severing his role in the group. For his replacement, they turned to Dennis Edwards, a former member of the Contours, who had been recommended by both Eddie Kendricks and Otis Williams. At first, the transition seemed smooth. Edwards and Ruffin had been friends, and Ruffin even appeared supportive of Edwards stepping in. But the illusion of peace did not last long. On July 7th, at Edwards' very first show with the Temptations in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, Ruffin shocked everyone by sneaking on stage and grabbing the microphone to sing lead on Ain't Too Proud to Beg. He disappeared as abruptly as he had appeared, leaving both the audience and the group stunned. What seemed like a one-time intrusion soon became a pattern. Throughout the group's July tour, Ruffin repeatedly found ways to slip past security and crash performances, taking over songs that had once been his signature. Audiences responded enthusiastically, cheering loudly for him, which only complicated the group's efforts to move forward with Edwards. Despite security being tightened, Ruffin's persistence made it nearly impossible to fully exclude him. These interruptions began to sway some members of the group. Eddie Kendricks and even Otis Williams briefly considered reinstating Ruffin, especially as the fans' excitement suggested that his return could boost the group's popularity. At one point, Otis even informed Edwards that he might be temporarily removed so Ruffin could rejoin. Yet Ruffin's unreliability resurfaced quickly. When the group scheduled his return at a performance in Gaithersburg, Maryland, Ruffin failed to arrive on time. This single misstep reaffirmed the others' belief that he could not be trusted. They abandoned the idea of reinstatement and moved forward with Edwards as the permanent lead. After this failure, Ruffin ceased interrupting their shows and instead turned his energy toward challenging Motown itself. In October of 1968, Ruffin filed a lawsuit against Motown, seeking release from his contract. The label countered with its legal action to prevent him from leaving. Eventually, the matter was settled out of court. Ruffin remained bound to Motown but transitioned into a solo career to fulfill his contractual obligations. Berry Gordy, determined to protect Motown's brand and the Temptations' future, ensured that Ruffin would not disrupt the group again. While he continued to record as a solo artist, the door back into the Temptations was effectively closed. Gordy's business-first mentality had prevailed. Discipline and unity mattered more than individual talent, no matter how great. For Ruffin, the fallout was devastating. His clashes had alienated him from his Motown bosses, strained his relationships with former bandmates, and left his once bright career overshadowed by controversy. For the Temptations, the painful decision to move on from their most recognizable voice ensured their survival, but it also marked the end of an era defined by David Ruffin's singular sound. The day Edwards stole Ruffin's spotlight. In the long history of popular music, few trials are more perilous than stepping into the role of a legendary singer. Listeners grow fiercely loyal to the familiar sound that first stirred their devotion. In the year 1968, Dennis Edwards found himself facing exactly this daunting task. He was asked to replace David Ruffin, the commanding tenor whose unforgettable voice had carried the Temptations through their golden era. The risk was immense. The group could have collapsed under the weight of such a dramatic shift. Yet Edwards' arrival breathed fresh energy into the ensemble. His robust, gospel-infused voice did not merely maintain their success, it propelled them into unexplored artistic territory. Although his journey ended on February 1st of 2018, just 2 days before his 75th birthday, his musical legacy continues to resonate through every recording he left behind. Dennis Edwards entered the world on February 3rd of 1943 in Fairfield, Alabama. The son of a preacher, he grew up with church as both a home and a training ground. Gospel harmonies shaped his earliest identity, providing the foundation of his booming sound. When his family relocated to Detroit, he immersed himself in the city's rich gospel culture. Like many gifted singers of his era, however, he soon realized that the spiritual stage alone rarely paid the bills. Sam Cooke's daring leap from sacred to secular provided a model. Reflecting years later, Edwards confessed, "At first, you sang for love, but eventually you needed enough to pay the bills, even just to do your laundry." After serving in the military, Edwards auditioned for Motown Records and secured a contract as a reserve artist. Before long, he joined the Contours, the spirited act known for the hit "Do You Love Me?" Performing with them gave him the chance to refine his intense delivery, developing the fiery sermon-like edge that would later define his career. During this same period, David Ruffin was experiencing both triumph and turmoil with the Temptations. Since his entry in 1964, Ruffin's soulful power had fueled unforgettable hits such as My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Wish It Would Rain. Yet fame began to inflate his ego. He demanded limousines separate from the rest of the group, pushed for special treatment, and even tried to rename the act David Ruffin and the Temptations. By the summer of 1968, tensions had reached their breaking point. On June 27th, Ruffin was dismissed. The very next day, Dennis Edwards stepped into his place. Motown chose to unveil Edwards gradually. His earliest work with the group came through collaborative projects, including Diana Ross and the Supremes Join the Temptations, and the televised special TCB, which premiered in December of 1968. Still, his true introduction occurred in the recording studio, guided by producer Norman Whitfield. Whitfield was intent on reinventing Motown's sound. Influenced by the sharp political commentary of Sly and the Family Stone, he envisioned a bold new approach called psychedelic soul. Edwards' background in gospel gave him exactly the forceful energy Whitfield needed. Their first major creation, Cloud 9, was released in October of 1968. The record, brimming with wah-wah guitars and funky rhythms, shattered the group's polished reputation. It earned the Temptations their very first Grammy Award and announced that Edwards was far more than a substitute. He was a revelation. The hits kept coming as Runaway Child, Running Wild, I Can't Get Next to You, Ball of Confusion, and Papa Was a Rolling Stone showcased Dennis Edwards' fiery voice, reflecting America's late 1960s turmoil. Yet tensions brewed, his thunderous delivery clashing with Eddie Kendrick's smooth falsetto. By 1971, after Just My Imagination soared, Kendricks and Paul Williams departed. The Temptations fired back with Superstar, Edwards voicing its sharp rebuke. His tenure was turbulent, leaving in 1976, returning in 1980 and 1987 while scoring a solo hit in 1984. Honors followed, including Hall of Fame induction, but this wasn't the only struggle Ruffin faced. Even away from the spotlight, he had his fair share of battles. Struggles beyond the spotlight. David Ruffin will forever be remembered for his electrifying stage presence and the rare ability to hold audiences spellbound with his gravel-edged, soulful voice. Born Davis Eli Ruffin, his path to stardom was laced with brilliance, heartbreak, and tragedy. From his earliest years, life tested him in ways that would shape the emotional depth of his music. His mother, Ophelia Ruffin, passed away, giving birth to him when he was only 10 months old. Left in the care of his father, Eli Ruffin, a stern Baptist minister, David grew up under strict discipline. Eli later married Erline, a schoolteacher who helped raise the children. Music was at the heart of the Ruffin household. David began singing at a young age, performing gospel alongside his father and siblings while traveling to churches and gatherings. His talent was undeniable, and by the time he turned 13, he left home, intending at first to follow a path in ministry. But his powerful stage delivery soon drew the attention of the secular music scene, and his ambitions took a new direction. By the dawn of the 1960s, Ruffin had settled in Detroit, Michigan, the heart of the Motown sound. In 1960, he signed with Anna Records, and a year later, he moved to Checkmate Records. Though these early ventures did not bring him financial reward, they placed him in the spotlight as a gifted vocalist with immense potential. His true breakthrough came in 1964 when he joined a Motown group that had yet to find major fame, The Temptations. Everything changed in March of 1965 when The Temptations released My Girl with Ruffin on lead vocals. The song stormed to the #1 spot on the charts and held its place for 8 straight weeks. Ruffin's raw and emotive voice had carried the group to stardom, and almost overnight, he became the face and sound that audiences associated with The Temptations. Throughout the mid-1960s, Ruffin's dynamic performances and deeply felt vocals propelled the group through a string of hits. To many fans, he was the soul of The Temptations, offering a musical refuge during an era defined by turbulence and social unrest. Yet, within the group, tensions grew. Ruffin wanted the recognition and compensation that lead singers in other bands were beginning to demand. His desire for separate billing and special treatment strained relationships and ultimately proved costly. By 1968, despite his vital role in the group's success, Ruffin was dismissed. Undeterred, he launched a solo career under the Motown label. His debut single, My Whole World Ended the Moment You Left Me, soared, earning critical acclaim and confirming his gift for heartfelt balladry. But the momentum did not last. Later collaborations, including work with his brother, Jimmy Ruffin, failed to make the same impact. David blamed Motown's lack of support for his fading chart presence, and by 1979, his time with the label ended. He later joined Warner Brothers but struggled to reclaim his former glory. In 1982, Ruffin rejoined The Temptations for a reunion tour, briefly rekindling public attention. Yet by the mid-1980s, he had largely disappeared from the spotlight, his career overshadowed by personal battles. Addiction and depression weighed heavily on him, complicating his life away from the stage. Still, David wasn't finished. In 1986, he joined forces with Eddie Kendricks, another Temptations alum, embarking on a fresh project that included major tours and performances. Together, they championed causes like the fight against apartheid, and even shared the stage with Hall & Oates at iconic events such as Live Aid. Despite these late career highlights, Ruffin's earlier brilliance had faded, leaving behind a legacy of both triumph and tragedy. However, Ruffin's career wasn't the only thing that was complicated. His relationships were just as complex. Ruffin's secret life and love affairs. David Ruffin's voice may have defined an era, but his private life was tangled in romance, betrayal, and pain. He married twice, first in 1961 to Sandra Barnes, with whom he fathered 3 daughters, Cheryl, Nedra, and Kimberly. A few years later, in 1964, he began a serious relationship with Jenna Sapia. Their union brought a son, originally named David E. Sapia, later changed to David Eli Ruffin, Jr. The family lived together for several years, but by 1976, Ruffin had married again, this time to Joy Hamilton. Following Ruffin's death, Jenna took the surname Ruffin in honor of their connection and her son. In 2003, Jenna Sapia Ruffin released a memoir titled A Memoir, David Ruffin, My Temptation. The book exposed the darker sides of their life together, including infidelity and harm. Yet she was not the only woman whose life was scarred by Ruffin's turbulent love. In 1966, Ruffin became romantically involved with Motown singer Tammy Terrell, who toured as part of the Motortown Revue. Their relationship was a storm of passion and volatility. Ruffin proposed marriage, only for Terrell to learn he was already wed, a revelation that shattered her trust. As his substance use worsened, so did his behavior. In 1967, an argument ended violently when Ruffin struck Terrell with a motorcycle helmet. The trauma weighed heavily on her. In a 1969 interview with Ebony magazine, Terrell confessed that the emotional strain from their romance likely aggravated the migraines she had endured since childhood. By 1970, she tragically lost her life to a brain tumor. In his final years, Ruffin lived in Philadelphia with Diane Showers, a fan he had first met when she was 14. Their bond deepened in 1989, and she remained by his side until his death. Another fascinating detail about Ruffin that continues to intrigue fans to this day is the mystery surrounding his death. What truly happened in his final hours? The untold mystery behind David Ruffin's final hours. In the late 1980s, the legacies of the Temptations were celebrated in different ways. In 1989, Otis Williams received the honor of induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, cementing his place in music history. Around the same time, David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks joined forces with fellow ex-Temptation Dennis Edwards, embarking on a tour that briefly rekindled the old spark. Yet, only days after the tour ended, tragedy struck. David Ruffin was rushed to a Philadelphia hospital, and within 1 hour, he was pronounced dead. The official cause was listed as an illegal substance overdose, but from the very beginning, his family raised troubling questions. To them, the story did not add up. Accounts suggest that on his final night, Ruffin visited a crack house in West Philadelphia with his friend Donald Brown. There, he allegedly consumed a substance that caused him to collapse. The Philadelphia Medical Examiner later ruled the death accidental, citing illegal substances in his system, while also pointing to his history of heart disease and hypertension. Still, the unusual circumstances surrounding his final hours fed rumors of foul play. Some insisted Ruffin had been sober for a significant time, making the overdose explanation hard to accept. Even strangers were reported about his clothing, described as bloodstained and torn. Family members wondered why his body had been found in such condition and why his clothes were later destroyed in a furnace. His daughter Nedra recalled seeing scratches on his body and swelling on his head when his remains were returned to Detroit. Financial questions deepened the mystery. Just before his death in June of 1991, Ruffin had completed a successful month-long tour with Kendricks and Edwards. Each singer was reportedly paid $50,000. $5,000 in cash, and the remainder as a bank draft. Yet Ruffin had demanded his full payment in cash, storing it in his briefcase. According to Edwards, Ruffin confirmed earlier that day that the money was still in his possession. After Ruffin's death, the briefcase and its contents were never found. Rumors swirled about people around him at the time. Nedra suggested that her father had been deceived for money and pointed to a woman named Diane Flowers as being part of the scheme. The suspicious disappearance of the cash, combined with Ruffin's injuries, left the family convinced that something darker than an accidental overdose had taken place. Despite their doubts, the family stopped short of requesting a second autopsy. Ruffin's brother Quincy advised against it, warning them of the potential complications. Still, the unease never faded. In a 2019 interview, Nedra spoke openly about her father's death, insisting that the truth had been obscured and that his story had been unfairly reduced to one of illegal substances and scandal. David Ruffin's passing in Philadelphia marked a bitter end for one of Motown's most unforgettable voices. Though officially ruled an overdose, the cloud of mystery, missing money, visible injuries, and conflicting accounts ensures that debate continues to this day. To his fans, Ruffin remains not just the voice of My Girl, but also a man whose life and death reflect both the brilliance and the darkness of fame. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.